This is the Free Spirits of L&D podcast, where we talk about life as a freelancer in the fascinating world of learning and development, and ask our guests all the questions you wanted to know but were maybe too afraid to ask. Yes, we even talk about how we get business and what we all charge. At the end of each episode, each guest gets to set a bonus question for the next one. So whether you're thinking about taking the leap, brand new to freelancing, or an experienced freelancer, you won't want to miss this. Today on the podcast, our special guest is Jules Wyman. Jules is a coach, a speaker, and founder of Positive Belief right here in York. In fact, her office is just around the corner from mine. Welcome, Jules.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
It's a pleasure. Now, I normally do say how many years somebody has been in working in the L&D industry, but it started to feel like I'm introducing the Rolling Stones, and sometimes I've got it wrong. So I'll let you share that. How many years have you been freelancing in this space?
21, it'll be in October this year, believe it or not.
That is incredible. That actually might be the longest serving L&D freelancer we've had on this podcast. You've got the award. You've got the gold star.
Well, considering it's not something I set out to do, yeah, I think that's quite hilarious.
Well, should we go to the beginning?
Sure.
Tell me a bit about your journey. What's your freelance journey? Or maybe your origin story. What was that all about?
Well, I think it's really interesting because you use the term freelance, and it's interesting because I probably see myself as less freelance now than I did prior to this career, weirdly, because my previous career was more, I would class as more freelance, more because I was moving around the country and contract to contract, because I worked in theatre and television. So I think one of the things that it's important from an origin story to understand is that I think twice in my working career, and I've been working since I was 13, probably twice I've had what would be classed as a permanent contract. And that includes my previous career as well as currently. So the previous career I had was already freelance. So then when I did then stumble into coaching, which I'll share that in a moment, I was already of the mindset of that I wasn't looking for a permanent job, if that makes sense, because I wasn't used to that frame up. So I had spent 10 years working in theatre and television all over the country, including working at the BBC, and worked with some amazing people, had a phenomenal career. However, I wasn't in a great headspace and there was no conversation then around mental health and it being okay to have those conversations. And I thought I was the worst person in the world, and it was just me that was experiencing what I was experiencing. And very long story short, I'd reached a point where I didn't want to be in this world anymore, and attempted to take my own life. And obviously I failed because I'm here. And what I realized at that point was that it's not actually that I wanted to end my life. I just didn't want to live the way that I was living. And that to me was a real eye-opening thing. And now initially from that, because of what I'd done, I was referred to a counsellor. I went to counselling and it just was not for me. And not long after that, somebody introduced me to coaching, and it was this really weird left field kind of thing that came in. And everybody that I spoke to about it that knew me was like, this is totally up your street. And I'm like, really? What is this weird thing called coaching? How is that up my street? Anyway, went to coaching, and the guy that was initially coaching me then said, I think it was like session 3 or 4, have you been reading coaching books? Have you been looking at how to coach yourself? And I'm like, no, it's your job to fix me, because that was the viewpoint I had at the time. Why do you ask? And he said, well, it's just that you've been coaching me for the last 10 minutes. I was like, really? That's just me. That's just how I show up. And he said, look, I seriously think you should go and have a look at this. And again, weird way, ended up being sponsored into a foundational coaching course, life coaching course. And I was doing that with my, as he then was, husband, he's now ex-husband. Both of us were doing it at the same time. And I was loving it. I thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. Whereas he was just like, this is ridiculous. He was putting off his homework. I was whizzing through mine. Never been like that in my life. So And then, as you know, then as you follow through with those kinds of and go beyond into a diploma, etc., you have to have case studies. And my case studies, without me realizing it, started referring me to people. So out of nowhere, I started getting phone calls. Can I book in to work with you? How much do you charge? What's the process? And it was a bit like, I get to charge for this? Because I was having so much fun that I just thought, how could you possibly charge for it? But that's basically, I did that for a little while and then realized that actually I could make a living with this. So registered the business and got serious with it in October 2005. And as I often jokingly say, I didn't start my business started me, because that's what it really feels like. Is it was an opportunity that I didn't know I needed and I didn't know that existed, and has just changed my life in ways that I couldn't even have thought possible.
Goodness me, Jules. I mean, we've had a lot of origin stories on this one, but I don't think any of them have started with, well, a bit of sharing like that. Thank you for sharing that with our audience. And on behalf of the L&D community, I'm very glad that you failed at the start of that origin story.
Me too.
I think about all the people that you have spent time with and coached and supported over those 21 years. Goodness me. The world will be a lot poorer place. There's a lot of what you've just shared there. I wonder whether we could just put a pin in a few of them, because I'd love to come back to them, particularly around charging. But can you just talk me through that thinking piece of going, well, oh, maybe this is a business. Can you remember what that was like, sort of figuring out, okay, so I could do this. Maybe this is what the rest of my life might look like, or the next 21 years might look like. What was that like?
I've never had a business plan. I've never had a business model that I like set out. So I think that's really important to say. And I'm not saying that that's the right way, but I do want to clarify that I am not somebody, because I don't come from that background. I didn't come from any kind of like corporate world or any kind of world where I didn't know strategies and processes. We didn't massively have that in the world that I worked in. So I didn't even know networking existed. I didn't know about HR. I didn't know about conferences that you could go to. None of that stuff. It was, at 33, I think I was at the time, 32, 33. This was just a, complete restart. And because of that, it was a case of finding things out along the way. So I think the only thing that I can remember having was I saw some really big names in the industry and had this whole thing of going, I want to be able to say that I've done this for 10 years. I want to be able to say that I've been doing this for 20 years. So I think that was at the back of my mind, but how and what that looked like, I didn't know. At the time I was training as a coach, I was also working in a call center, and something very odd happened one day. I was that annoying person that was phoning you up whilst you were about to sit down and have your dinner and say, would you mind doing a survey? I apologise to everybody, but that was probably me. And whilst I was doing this particular time, as I just had, as I pretty much always do, even to this day, have a piece of paper by the side of me and a pencil. And if anything pops up, I just jot it down. And as I was hitting the numbers that I was calling, all of them were ringing out. No one was answering. And out of nowhere, what I now know was a workshop, just started pouring out. And I finished my shift and I had 5 sheets of A4 with different spider diagrams, just different things written down. And it was like it was just pouring out of me. I wasn't really sat thinking about it. I then sort of like put it together, and I went to a couple of people and I said, what's this? And they were the ones who put the word workshop to it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I went to my youngest stepson's school at the time, primary school, and I had a chat with the head teacher. And I said, look, I'm learning this stuff and it's really making a difference in my life. And back then, 25 years ago, this wasn't as prevalent. Social media didn't exist. So the whole conversation around personal development and self-help wasn't there. And I just outlined to him what I'm thinking of doing, because I think if I'd have known this as a child, it could have made a difference to my life. And he bit my hand off going, come and do it, come and test it out. Of course, I wasn't charging anything. But I think that showed me that there was an appetite for something. There was an appetite for doing things differently. And the same with when those case studies were referring me to people, having those conversations and just going, oh, people are interested in this. So I didn't have a grand plan. I didn't have, I want to reach this many people or earn this amount of money, because I actually didn't know what was possible. It was all finding it out as I went along the route, if that makes sense.
So what sort of things did you experiment with that maybe went well and you carried them into your 21 years? And were there any things that maybe didn't work so well?
Well, initially I wanted to go into and work with schools and work with students, because I was so passionate about, if I'd have known this stuff, then I wouldn't have taken the drugs and taken the alcohol and got into bad relationships and led myself to the point of wanting to take my own life. So that was my initial thinking. And then I noticed so many barriers, that, you know, people didn't want to pay. They didn't have the money to pay. The biggest barrier for me that I noticed was I was only getting an hour once a week with these young people, and all of the other influences. And again, I reiterate, this is way before social media, but all the other influences that those children had at that point. And I just thought, you know what, this 1 hour is potentially not really going to make a huge difference. So how best can I do it? And that's when it then morphed into working with women, because women tend to impact the family more. They tend to impact a wider range more. And so I focused in that way, and then smart men got involved as well. So it morphed in that way. But I think the theme very much at the beginning that I was like, this is really helpful, is understanding confidence. So that's where at the time there was no one else that I knew, even in North Yorkshire, that I knew of that had studied and then labelled themselves as a confidence coach. They were either business coaches, sports coaches. I knew a results coach. I knew life coaches. But I was at that point the only confidence coach that I knew of. People started to refer to me as the confidence coach, which I thought was really interesting, because it wasn't intentional, but it gave me a niche and a focus that was easy for anyone to articulate, because everyone's got an opinion of confidence, whether it's there or whether it's not. So yeah, none of it was intentional. I'd love to say it was really strategic, but it just wasn't. And I think the only thing that I can honestly say that I've continued is the consistency, because to me, business is an experiment. It took me probably into my 15th year to finally see that. But it's an experiment. And if you take it too seriously, you're going to get caught up with trying to get it right. And the way that was going for me was I was following other people's models and other people's processes, which worked brilliantly for them because it matches what they're looking for. And it's great to have a look at those and maybe go, actually, that would work. You know, I'd like to have a go with that. But I certainly, for at least 15 years, was too serious on trying to get it right, following other people's way, rather than going, what do I want? How do I want to do this? And really experiment. So I think the one thing that I've been consistent with is my message. So I've always wanted to be honest. I've always wanted to be show my humanity, because I don't want to come across as somebody who's got it all sorted, never makes mistakes, and life is all rosy and shiny, because it's not. Life is just life. So that's something, and also the only other thing is, as well, is my humor. I don't think, again, it was a conscious thing that I was like, must be funny, but I think through life, I've always looked for the silliness. I have a family member, my granddad, who I've probably spoken to you about, and I think his silliness was a big part of my life. He made everything funny. Didn't matter what we were doing, he would make it funny. And I think that has influenced me. So even if we're having a serious topic, if I can take the mickey out of myself that then brings a different viewpoint, then I will do. So I think the consistency, the humanity and humour have carried through, but actually how I've been delivering what I do might have changed slightly.
That's so interesting. I was just thinking about that whole silliness piece, because one of the things that kind of in recent years has kind of pulled me away from a lot of L&D industry work is just a move away from a sense of just everything is so serious all the time. And I've done a lot of that, and I've been in those rooms, and I've heard all the jargon and the acronyms, and it's surprising how when you inject a little bit of silliness into one of those conversations or one of those meetings, people just do relax, and they do kind of realize that actually it's like snapping somebody out of a dream.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it feels like that sometimes where we go, oh, right, okay, we are just all human beings, right? We don't all need to play these games where we talk to each other in this incredibly serious communication style and use our own sort of invented language that we've made up. It's actually,
I think that was it. I think that's the beautiful thing, that because I didn't come from a business world, I came from show business. There wasn't any management speak. So I actually didn't know that management speak at all. You know, let's circle back to this and how are we moving forward through this and all this. I didn't know any of that languaging. I mean, I can remember, this is going to sound like it is name dropping, but I'm doing it for a reason. I was 21, and I'm sat having lunch with Penelope Keith, Lauren Bacall and Joss Ackland. They weren't treating me as any different, and I wasn't an actor. So I didn't have any problem with going and being sat with the chief exec or, the director of finance or the coup or whoever, because I didn't see them as any different, because that's just the way that the kind of education of, I suppose, that I had through theatre. And it was a case of, as much as it gets a bad rap, and there are some very bad things, rough things that go on in the show business world, I'm not going to deny that. But there is also this weird equality, especially on the technical side, in my experience anyway. It was more who can do the job rather than, oh, that's a heavy lifting job, let me go and get a boy, or that's a sewing job, let me go find a girl. It was just, can you thread a needle? Right, you're doing it. Can you lift that? Then you're doing it. There was never, so I think that was a gift that I hadn't appreciated. That by then going into a conference, and there's one particular conference I'm thinking of, I was sat doing this exercise with this guy, just chatting to this guy. I knew his name was Rob, and we were doing it, and there was 300 people or whatever. I was one of the speakers and just happened to be doing this exercise. And then it came to the lunch break, and someone ran over to me and was like, do you know who you're sat next to? And I was like, yeah, Rob. They're like, yeah, but you know who he is? And I'm like, no. And apparently he had some big job title that then meant that everybody else was bowing down to him, rather than I just treated him as a normal person. So I think there were a lot of, and actually, regardless of the industry that you come from, I do think that there is a beauty. There's so many skills that we pick up. You know, you could have been a baker, but there'll still be skills that you can bring through in that baking industry into L&D. Because they're all transferable. And I think that very often we think, oh no, I have to be this way and very serious and learn this management speak. And actually, if you just bring the humanity to it, then it stops a lot of the conversations being so serious.
Can I bring you back to something you mentioned a little while ago around being given this label, the confidence coach? Because I think there's a bit of a debate that goes on in our industry where you kind of either have to go, yeah, you should niche down, you should find your niche, you should find your audience, and you should really get deep down into that niche and speak directly to this person called Sue who drives a Ford Mondeo and is 58 years old, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, versus just going, offer what you offer and your niche will kind of emerge, or your audience will find you. There's kind of two questions here. First of all, what do you think about that? And then the second one is, has being given that label maybe held you back in any way?
Good questions. I think the whole niching down thing can get people just up their own arses, quite frankly. And I think it can tie people in knots. If you know it and you know who it is, great. Use that niche and run with it. And if you don't, then that's okay too, because you got to start somewhere. And I think that it does emerge. And again, you know, If I think about the kind of people that I'm working with, everything from an image consultant. So on my books at the moment, I've got an image consultant, an opera singer, a professional actor. I've got a chief exec. I've got MD of very serious businesses. I've got people who work in the public sector. They're male and female. They all tend to be above 35. So how do I niche that down? And it's one of my biggest challenges. The thing that has been advantageous with labeling with the confidence coach was that it gave people a starting point of a conversation to be able to go, oh, I think need to talk with that lady. Mm. But I also think that in the last maybe 4 or 5 years and in fact, only yesterday on LinkedIn, I changed. It doesn't say confidence coach anymore. I literally changed it yesterday because it now says transformational coach. And it's not that I'm not stopping the confidence conversation, but I think that the way that I am showing up and the conversations that I'm having now are much more of a transformational nature, that if I only stick with that one word and don't learn to, and I am still learning to, how to communicate that to a wider audience, then I am going to be limiting who I can connect with and support. So I'm not dropping the confidence stuff because it's still something I'm very passionate about. But there are some deeper conversations that I'm having that are where I would like to talk to a lot more. So it's definitely served me well. And it's now time for that to become a subheading, as if it were.
Just if I could get into the nitty gritty of that, then that change, because there's more than just changing your LinkedIn profile, right? Are you then adjusting other stuff that you're doing in order that you're going down more of the transformational route rather than confidence? What are how else are you trying to manage that label so that it's not less something that just gets given to you?
Yeah. In a one-on-one conversation or even a one-to-many conversation, I haven't yet worked out how to articulate it, but I'm going through, so literally last month I went through my website and, how can I really start to clearly talk about what it is that I offer? From the outside, it might still look like exactly the same thing, but I know that this is a step change towards something else. I know that the depth of the conversation is going beyond the psychology, and that sometimes takes a bit more of an exploration and a bit more of an explanation for people to understand. So I want to make it accessible for people, but also very clear what it is that I offer as well. I mean, I have clients that come to me and they very much, it's for one thing, this is what I want to look at, which might be confidence, it might be presentation, or there's a number of different things, but this is the thing. And they work with me for that period of time and that's it. Got what I wanted, feel very great about that. And they disappear off. And some of them I never, ever hear from again. And then some of them start in that same point of this is the one thing I want to look at. And then partway through that journey, they're like, oh, there's other stuff here, isn't there? Oh, that's exciting. Let's go down that route. And then they stay and then they stay and then they do other things. They come on the retreat. They stay longer working with me and they start to experience that unfolding and that what emerges for them. So I still don't yet know how to clearly articulate it. Transformational is the only word that I can link it with at the moment, because I know we're going from this point to that point, but not in a goal setting way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And because like a lot of my time is spent on thinking about YouTube and how to package ideas for YouTube. And one of the cool concepts I came across a little while ago was helping people find the problem behind the problem. So as an example, it might be like, you might make a YouTube video that's about how you deliver a speech on a stage, a presentation on a stage. You might make that video and give people some tips on how to do that. But actually, you might finish it off by saying, well, actually, none of this really matters if you haven't resolved the problem behind the problem, which it could be about confidence, or it could be about how you speak or how you frame your thoughts or how you design your presentation. So it feels like you've kind of gone to the problem behind the problem with your brand there.
I think it's the superficial. You know, with the rise on the access of personal development in all the many guises, social media, YouTube, all those different platforms, and the freebies that are out there, which are brilliant. And you know, there's some really great content out there, and a great deal of it is surface level stuff. So how do I look confident? How do I come across as confident? How do I access it when I need to? And that's great. But I want to know it's there all the time. I want to experience that when the proverbial is hitting the fan. I want to know that even if I want to know that I don't have to mega prep for a podcast in order to be able to be interviewed and be me and show up. I want to be that. I want to know how to do that. And I think that it's not a right, wrong thing. And for some people, that's all I want is that. Give me the 4 steps, give me the strategy. That's it. That's all I want. And then they'll keep going back to use it. It's coping thing. Somebody said to me, I just want to know how to cope. And I'm like, well, that's a bit of a crappy way to live your life, isn't it? It's just constantly coping. What would happen if you just dropped that and lived? And they're like, oh God, how do you do that? And so, yeah, it is the problem behind the problem. And I think I've always done that. Well, maybe not always. It's only been the last 4 or 5 years that I've gone, I need to articulate this more so that it doesn't just look like the superficial's being offered. I'm still working out how to articulate it.
Yeah. And that's really cool, isn't it? Sort of when you're in that space of figuring out how does this land? How am I going to package this? How am I going to present this to the world? That's quite a fun place to be too.
And that goes to the point of experiment. You know, that's the whole thing. If you're getting very caught up of, I have to know who my niche is, I have to know what my brand is, I have to have the website sorted out. All of those things are great and they're helpful. But if that's stopping you from getting out there and showing what it is that you have to offer, then don't start with those. Just get out there. Be messy. Stumble over your words. Mess up the pitch, because that's when you'll learn. You'll only learn by getting the pitch wrong. You'll only learn by having that discovery call with somebody and they're like, God, no way, I don't want to work with you. And if you can even go, okay, without beating yourself up, what do I think that wasn't helping there? Where were the stumbling blocks? What wasn't I clear on? And maybe you do need to go and upskill on some things, and maybe you do need to have a 3-step process to start from, but give yourself the permission to up, please.
Yeah.
Whoever the lady is that established Spanx as a business, that her father had a philosophy which every single night when they sat down for dinner as a family, he wanted to know from the children, what did you try at school today and fail at? Not because he was going to chastise them, because he was like, okay, so what did you learn? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What could you do differently? Are you going to have another go? And she said that whole philosophy has just given her the opportunity to have a go. It's the same as apparently some of the best business startups in America are Mormons, because at the age of around about 18, they are sent on missions to countries that do not want them to be there, that aren't going to listen to them, that's not going to convert. So they go knocking on doors or stand on street corners and going, we'd like to talk to you about, and people go, no, door slam, door slam, door slam. So that builds a resilience, that builds I'm ready for the no, give me the next. And I think that if we could develop that for ourselves, and I certainly didn't have that at the beginning, I was desperate for the yes, hankered after it. And if I didn't get the yes, I would beat myself up. But if the more we can go, just have a go, see what happens. And I've really pushed that in the last few years with doing the podcast, my own podcast. The shop link I sent you the other day, that's like me going, oh, well, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to create these products anyway. My online courses, all these different things, I'm like, I'm just going to have a go. And if it absolutely goes belly upward, so what?
Retreats also springs to mind. It's something that you run in a space where people weren't doing that sort of thing. I was seeing you do this stuff. Like, oh, that's really cool that you're playing around with this, and people are clearly wanting it. Yeah,
I think this is the 15th year of doing retreats. I call them time to be, and every single retreat is designed and created for that specific group. So I've got one client who has been to 95% of my retreats since I started. And when people find out, they're like, why do you keep going if you've already been? And he's like, because it's never the same retreat. I love that freedom and that exploration. I've written the retreat before now, and then within half an hour of being there and chatting to them, gone, do you know what, this is not, and I've thrown it away and literally sat that night and gone, what's going to be most helpful? So I love that. I love that opportunity to explore.
And very much in your kind of wheelhouse of humanity and transformation as well. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. Thank you, Jules. I'm going to ask you a question from our previous guest. His question was, what do you wish you knew at the beginning of your freelance experience that you do know now?
Frogs.
Go on.
For friends, relations, organisations, groups and social. So I think, and I've witnessed this many, many times, it doesn't mean that if anyone's stepping away from a particular working world and going into a new, it doesn't have to be L&D, but if they're going into something new, quite often what we do is we want to cut it off. We don't want to continue being around those other people, or we're not doing that anymore. We're doing this fresh new thing. And Frogs is about reach out to those friends, let them know what you're doing. You be, to your best of your abilities, articulate it. They don't have to be buying your stuff, but let them know, let them in on it. And it's the same with the relations as well. And mention it in organizations, any groups that you're part of, and on your socials. Because I think what we do, and I certainly did this, is, I'm done with the show business world, right? I'm starting out on this new world, and I don't really know what this new world is because there was a 2-year gap, and therefore didn't really communicate the two, and didn't see that there was a connection. And I think that it's really easy. I've seen people do it in so many different industries where they draw a line, and actually it may not be helpful. It may not be that I don't want to go back and work in that world. That's not what I'm saying. But they may need what it is that you're offering. So ask them, make sure they know. And I think the other thing as well in relation to Frogs is that I think we make the assumption because we post something on social media or because we've mentioned it to one friend that everybody knows. And this really hit home to me at the beginning of this year when a friend of mine who is on my mailing list, she's chosen to be on my mailing list, and every week I send out a reflection email, and it's my reflection on the week. And I've been doing it for about, I think, 3 or 4 years now. And she messaged me after one of the ones I'd sent out, and she was like, I really love this. This has really hit home for me. It was perfect timing. Thank you so much. Do you know what you should do? Is you should collate these into a book. And I just sent her message back, the emojis of ha, 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 ha. And she went, no, seriously, I think it would be a really great idea. These are so good. You should collate them into a book. And I just sent her then the link from my book. And she was like, yeah, no, but this one, you'd collate all the reflections in there. And I went, that is what my book is. So it's a collation of my reflections with questions. And she was like, oh God, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, that's not your bad. That's my bad that it hasn't been articulated in that way. And I think we make assumptions, especially if you're freelancing L&D or freelancing in anything, is we get caught up in that world. We know what projects we're working on and who we're working with, and we assume that other people do because we might have mentioned Mark Gilroy podcast. So we assume everybody else knows. Yeah. Or we may have put one post out there, but with social medias the way that they are, the platforms the way they are at the moment, you cannot guarantee that you're going to get seen by your friends and family. And they're the ones who are going to be your champions. So make sure you have those conversations. It doesn't have to be, oh God, look at me, I'm so brilliant. Even share the difficult stuff. What I'm wanting to do is reach into here, or I'm trying to get this paper complete, or I'm writing a tender and it's doing my head in, or doesn't matter what it is, but let those people within those various groups know. Let them into your world a little bit, basically. I think that's the thing that I could have done with doing a lot more of at the beginning.
Super advice. Thank you, Jules. And how about for you? Would you like to set a question for the next guest, not knowing who it will be?
Yeah. My question would be, what is the most helpful lesson that you have learned from one of your clients?
Oh, love that. Okay. We'll definitely ask that of our next guest. Before we do, though, do you want to have a crack at it yourself?
I thought you might ask me that, so I did have a think about it myself. I think there's a number of lessons. It's the same thing that I've learned from a number of clients, which is it's not personal. And there's two clients in particular. There's only in 21 years, there's only two people I've ever given their money back to. And both of it was prompted by me. Shows you how long ago it was. I wrote the check out. He was constantly turning up late, like half an hour, 45 minutes to a session. And I handed him the check back. He literally walked in the door and I just handed them the check back for the sessions he's already paid for, and just said, look, this is not working. This is not where you want to be. You've got other priorities. And I know it's not about me, and I know it's not about coaching. It's about whatever's going on for you. And it was the same thing with the woman that I'm thinking of, is that she was in such a turmoil with what was going on in her life, and she was looking for me to fix it, and was then every call that we were having was getting angry with me because I wasn't fixing it. And so I did the same thing, which was offer her money back, but highlight why, but realizing that wasn't a failure on anyone's part. It was just how they were receiving what was going on was to do with what was happening for them at that point. It wasn't about me. It may have looked like it. It may have felt like it for myself. So that's the biggest thing is it's not personal when someone shows up late. It's not personal when someone makes a late payment. It's about whatever's going on for them. And the more you can see that, the freer it becomes to be able to then respond or react to whatever's happening in a more congruent and considered way.
Yeah, that's a great thing to have learned. And I'm now thinking about all the times when I have taken it extremely personally, either positively or negatively, when it comes to those relationships. Thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
I've got two more questions for you. One's like a mini question, but I've got one big question for you. And it's the question we ask all our guests on this podcast. And it's, what do you charge?
£2.50. So,
how many years ago was that? Was that my check as well?
Yeah. So I think it's a difficult question to answer. One of the things that I was really lucky, there's been 3 points in my life when, for varying reasons, long, complicated stories, where someone has sponsored me for something. So my initial coaching course was sponsored by somebody else. My initial coaching was sponsored by somebody else. Another big course that life-changing for me was sponsored by somebody else. So because of that, I've always promised myself that there will be accessible points for people to be able to access the work that I do. So I've created free things like the weekly reflection. It isn't just a sales email that goes out. Yes, there'll be information about what I'm up to, but the 500 words is about value, and hopefully giving you prompts to help yourself. And it's the same with the podcast, is giving people the opportunity to be able to access quality information that potentially can make a difference for people. And then I step things up from there. So there's the free stuff, then I've got the books, then I've got the membership, which is a monthly thing. Then there's 2 different levels on that as well, so that it gives people wherever they're at, before you then go into the retreats and one-to-one coaching. So it's different access points for people, because one of my promises was I never wanted money to be the issue and be the barrier to at least get started. I think the biggest quote unquote problem that people tend to actually put in their way, and I think it's even more so now, is time. Is finding the time, or rather more accurately, taking the time. So again, even if it's reading an email, listening to a podcast, reading a book, there's different access points from a time perspective as well. So that's what's always been important for me, is I do not undervalue the transformational work that I do and how that can impact on somebody's life. And I also don't want to be pricing myself out of a way of being able to help people when I want to help them.
Yeah. For a second there, I thought you were going to say it depends, because we have a special bell that we ring when someone says it depends. But it kind of always does, doesn't it? It does depend. Yeah. It depends on so much, on kind of how you value yourself, what value you want to add to the world, who you want to work with. And you get to decide all of those things when you are running your own business. It's one of the most beautiful things about it.
The one thing I would add into that, actually, now that you've said that, is the key thing to remember is however much you're charging, the value that you offer through the service that you provide is not your value. And it really annoys me when people say, you know, that you've got to value what it is that you value yourself and therefore you charge that. It's like, no. If I'm a skilled gardener, then that's what I'm charging you for, is that skill and that expertise. But whether I get paid for that or not, my personal value does not change. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people who freelance get caught up in, is because they assume that their net worth is their self-worth, and they are two completely different things.
Thank you for sharing that. And I that really resonated with me. And I've got a personal experience of that. When I remember stepping back from my corporate job, at the time I was like about as high as I could go within that particular company, and stepping out of that into working for myself, knowing that it would be getting rid of a lot of security and a bit of a pay cut, was really scary. And behind that, the problem was, is my value changed? Because I'd attached, for so many years, I'd attached this little pay slip I got at the end of the month to my personal value that I was adding. Being able to separate that out is a really good bit of advice for anybody at any stage of their career, whether they're employed, self-employed, or doing whatever they want to do. I think that's a huge piece of gold to drop right at the end of the show.
You're very welcome.
Classic Jules there, little lightning bolt at the end. Alongside everything else that we've talked about and everything else that you've shared, I feel like we could have spent 2 hours talking about your 20 years. So thank you for being so generous with your time and everything else that you've been talking about on today's episode.
It's an absolute pleasure, because I think to me that there is so much within it. So it's a real pleasure to be able to have this kind of conversation.
So our final question, which is a mini question, is genuinely about, for people who are listening into this and want to learn more about you and what you do and what you've been getting up to, what's the best way of doing that, Jules?
The best way is to go to the website, which is juleswyman.online. So JULESWYMAN.online, because everything that I've spoken about, all the free resources, the podcast, the membership, the retreats, the one-to-one coaching, the speaking, everything, and the socials, it's all linked on there. So that's the best way. And feel free to reach out and ask questions. I'm always up for having coffees with people, having conversations, because you never know what you can learn from each other and how best you can support each other.
Super duper. Thanks. I'll drop that in the show notes as this one goes out.
Thank you
for joining us, Jules.
Pleasure. Thanks, Mark.
If you enjoyed this episode, let us know by leaving a review on your favourite podcast app. It really makes a difference. And if you want to learn more about how L&D Free Spirits can lift up your freelancing business, you can find out more information at ldfreespirits.com.